gathered 10 books that I think are the perfect books to read this autumn, and they're very different genres, so I hope there's something for everyone here. But I'm just gonna start out. There are a few books that are my ultimate favorite autumn reads that I have not decided to add into this video, only because I know I'll mention them a bunch of times later on in a bunch of other videos, just because I like them so much. So these are books that I don't think I'll necessarily talk a lot about here. Let's just jump right into it. So the first book I have is a cozy murder mystery, and it is In the Company of Witches by Auralee Wallace. And there are 2 books in this series. This is the first book, and it's just the perfect autumn read, I would say. It's a book about a woman who lives with her 2 aunts, and they're all witches. And our main character, whose name is Bryn, she is a witch of the dead, so she can communicate with dead people. And there's been a murder at her aunt's bed and breakfast. So ultimately she has to speak to this ghost and figure out what's happened. She hasn't used this gift in a couple of years since her husband passed away. So she's a little hesitant to try and communicate with the dead again. And it's just a really good cozy murder mystery. I think this is actually my favorite out of all the ones I've read. And it's giving practical magic vibes with the Airbnb and the witchy aunts. It's just very, very cute, and also a little deeper, I think, than a lot of the other cozy murder mysteries I've read. The next book I have is The Dark Vault by Schwab. I think this might be her most underrated book. At least I've never really seen anyone talk about it. It's one of my favorites. I tend to like all her lesser known books for some reason, and that's why I thought I had to include it in this video. The Dark Vault is about a girl who works at what they call these vaults, and this is basically where people go when they've passed on. So these people, they're called histories, I think. Yes, histories, and they are kind of in these vaults in an area that she can go to, and her job is to find all the people who can't find rest and are kind of lost in all these hallways and lead them all their way to their resting place. So it's a book that deals with death in sort of a mysterious and fantasy, but also very heartfelt way. And it's a little sad at times, but it's just a really good book. And I can't believe more people aren't talking about this one. I thought it was amazing. So The Dark Vault is actually a combination of 2 books, and they used to be called the Archive series. I've never seen them separately. I've only seen this one, and I've only ever found it in one bookstore. Again, I don't understand what's happening. This book is so good. Highly recommend it. The next one is a classic, that is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. And I think basically everyone and their grandmother has read this book by now. It's a dark academia book, a little like The Secret History, but I would say this book is a lot easier to follow along, mostly because it's not in Latin. Here, it's a bunch of students at a university who all study Shakespeare, and they tend to act like the characters that they're also cast as in their place. But then this one time, they're cast as other characters, so the people who might normally play the heroes, they suddenly have to play the villains, and vice versa. And one of them ends up dead. So we start this book out when the person who is accused of the murder gets out of prison after 10 years, and the police officer comes to him and he wants to find out what actually happened 10 years before. And it's just, it's a great book. It has you on the edge of your seat the entire time. I finished this in one day, which is something I don't normally do. I'm a huge foodie. I will never skip a meal. I forgot about dinner while I was reading this. I finished it in one sitting. It's that good. Highly recommended. I have another book that I also finished in one day, mostly because it was so scary that I didn't want to prolong the experience. I just wanted to be done with it, but also because it was that good and that captivating. And that is House of Hollow by Krystal Sutherland. So apparently this book is based on an old folk tale. I didn't know that going into this book, so I was just captivating from the very first chapter because I had no idea what was gonna happen. But it's about these 3 sisters who disappeared for a month when they were younger, and then they reappeared and no one knew where they went, and the girls didn't know either, and they had kind of changed. They were not quite the same when they returned. So definitely something happened to them, but we don't know what. And then the oldest sister, she disappears. And the two younger sisters, they have to figure out where she went and what is happening. And like, I can't say too much because that would completely spoil this book. But just know, like, every once in a while, I think about this and I get goosebumps and my brain is like exploding because I'm just thinking about how crazy this book was. The days after I finished this one, I told everyone who wanted to hear about it, the storyline, because that was how much it was just in my mind all the time. Amazing book, amazing book. Normally I'm not one for retellings, but I didn't know the story this was based on, so everything was just a mystery to me. And yeah, it's really good and it's perfect for this season. The next book is actually a graphic novel, and this is one you will finish in an hour probably, and it's Fangs by Sarah Anderson. And it's what it says on the back is it's a love story between a vampire and a werewolf, and that is pretty much what it is. So it's just this werewolf and a vampire, and they're dating, and it's just really freaking cute. And it's just these short stories all the way through, and like really funny things that the author has thought about. And it's just really wholesome. I think there's much else to say about this. I think it sells itself. It's very wholesome, very autumnal, a quick read, and also this version of it is just beautiful with the black sprayed edges. The next book I have is a classic, and that is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. It's French, I think. What I really enjoy about this one is that it has been the inspiration for a lot of books that are written today. And I've read some of those, but there's still none of them that are as eerie as this one is. So it's about our main character. We actually don't really get her name for a good reason. And she meets this man in the southern parts of France. And he's a widower, and they fall in love, and he brings her back to his like big mansion. But there is something a little off at this mansion. And his ex-wife, Rebecca, she just keeps being brought up, and it's like she's still in the house, like she is in everything, the way the people who work there talk about her, and also her new husband. And she can just kind of feel that Rebecca has never moved on from the house. And I can't say too much because that will spoil it. If you want to pick up a classic and a book that is gothic and really eerie and just the kind of book that like creeps up on you, I highly recommend this one. I think this might be one of my favorite classic books of all time. And it's not because a lot happens, but there's just something about the atmosphere of this book that is just perfect. And yeah, I can't say too much. I'm not gonna spoil it, but highly recommend reading this one as well. And then I have the only romance books on this list. I feel like summer is more like the romance time, but this one, even the cover screams autumn, and that is You Again by Kate Goldbeck. And this book is inspired by When Harry Met Sally. Ari and Josh, they meet at the apartment of the woman they're both sleeping with, and they're not friends from the beginning. They're kind of enemies. And then they just keep on running into each other, and it ends up turning into a friendship where they like talk on the phone, watch movies together, kind of like When Harry Met Sally. And of course, at one point, they start to catch feelings for each other. But this book made me miss New York so much. And the characters are just very well-rounded, and they feel like actual people, like they have flaws. And it makes sense that they get so frustrated with each other. But it also makes sense that there's an attraction between these two characters. One is a comedian, that's Ari, and then Josh is a chef. So it's not your typical romance book, I would say, just because it's a little more serious than that. But it also means that the romantic scenes hit that much harder, I would say. Like, it just felt real. It felt like actual people walking around in New York. And the book is definitely as autumnal as the cover is. I've really enjoyed reading this one. Then I have Modern Divination by Isabel, and then a last name I am too scared to pronounce in case I butcher it. But this book it's hard to explain what it's about. It's definitely a lot of vibes, but it's about Aurelia, who's a witch, and her magic has started to fade. and she finds out that there's this person who's after other people's magic. So this person is stealing other people's magic, and she has to team up with her arch nemesis from university, Theo. Again, I can't say too much without spoiling a lot of it, but I would say this one is really character driven. So it's a lot about Auralee and Theo's relationship, and also their relationship with other people. If you like the cover of this book, I really think you will enjoy the book as well, because that is the vibe for sure. I really can't say too much. All I remember are just like these feelings, and then these different scenes that stand out to me. The writing in this one is really beautiful, and there were a lot of parts that I had to reread just because I enjoyed reading it so much, and it gave me like so many very vivid pictures in my head, and I had to annotate a lot of it as well. So I think if you're in the mood for a vibey, character-driven, low fantasy book, this is definitely the book for you. The next book is Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House. This is her most famous novel, and I know I also mentioned her in my last video, but that's just because she is kind of the author I connect with Autumn. So yeah, as I said, this is her most famous one. There's also a Netflix show based on this one, but I've heard that it's very different from the book. I really enjoyed the book. It's not very long, and it's definitely something you can read in like a day, but there are some really scary parts in this book. It's about these 4 people who move into Hill House, and then weird things start to happen, and the house kind of claims one of the guests. And that's not a spoiler, that's what it says on the back of the cover as well. So we have these very unreliable characters, and we have a house that is starting to possess one of them, and it's just so creepy. It really shouldn't be creepy, but the way Shirley Jackson wrote this book just makes it so really unsettling all the time. So I just had goosebumps from the beginning to the end, and I recommend this to basically everyone who wants to read a classic horror story. I think that's what I would define this book as. Finally, I have The Wishy Game by Meg Schaffer. We follow Lucy, who's a school teacher, and when she grew up, she used to escape into this Clock Island series written by an author who has stopped writing books. And then suddenly he makes a competition where he has 4 readers come to his island, and they have to solve some riddles and mysteries. And then they will win the last book he will publish. And she enters this competition and meets people who will change her life in the story. And it's just really, really heartwarming, and again, a feel-good book. I remember crying at the end, and as you can see, I've annotated it as well. I really enjoyed this one. If you love reading, and if you've loved reading as a child as well, I think this book will hit very close to heart. I really feel like it's a love letter to books and the power that they have, and the way they can be a great escape from reality, and how books can become our best friends. It's really, really heartwarming, not scary at all. That's one of the few books on this list. But yeah, those are all the books that I would recommend to read this autumn. There are, of course, a lot of other ones, but these were all 5-star reads for me, and that's why I've added them to this list. So I hope I've piqued some of your interest, and you might have found a book that you want to pick up this autumn. I would love to hear if any of them really spoke to you, and if you're thinking about picking it up, and otherwise I would love to hear about another 5-star autumn read that you have. That will be all. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!